Hello and welcome to today's webcast, Strengthen Your Security Environment with Azure Sentinel, brought to you by Insight Cloud and Data Center Transformation. I'm Rachel Mason, Marketing Manager at Insight, and will be your moderator today. Before we begin, I wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. This webcast is designed to be interactive between you and the presenters. The webcast console you are looking at can be completely customized. You can resize or move any of the windows that you have open. If you have any questions during the webcast, you can click on the Q&A widget at the bottom and submit your question. All questions from this webcast will be captured, and there will be a Q&A during the last few minutes of the presentation. If you are experiencing any technical difficulties, please visit the webcast help guide by clicking on the question mark icon below the presentation window. The help guide covers common technical questions. I would now like to turn this presentation over to our presenter, Jason Rader. Jason, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. We're glad to have you with us as we talk about strengthening your security environment with Azure Sentinel. I'm Jason, and I'll be going over the agenda in the first couple of slides. I'm the National Practice Director for Network and Cloud Security for Insight. I'm happy to introduce also with me Tony Manelli, who's the Managing Principal for the Security Practice, as well as Gary Bushy, who is a Cloud Security Architect on the team, and also the author of the Learn Azure Sentinel book that's just recently been published. As far as the agenda goes today, we're going to talk a little bit about Insight's capabilities from a Microsoft perspective to kind of set the stage. Then we'll turn it over to Tony, who'll talk about the current state of security in general. We'll go into cybersecurity architecture and frameworks. We will talk about Azure Sentinel specifically from an application and solution perspective, available resources that we've got for you, and then we'll get into some interesting client stories at the end of this. So first and foremost, we wanted to kind of set the stage related to Insight and our history with Microsoft in general. There's been a 30-year partnership with Microsoft. We're currently their largest global reseller. We've got a huge investment from a Microsoft partnership perspective. From a security practice, we are all in from a Microsoft perspective, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we move forward. But in general, you know, from a 2019 and 2020 perspective, we've, fastest growing Surface reseller. So on the endpoint perspective, we're the Azure Team Partner Choice Award for Data and AI. We have the Application Innovation. We're Education finalist for the Worldwide Award, as well as Customer Experience. And most recently at RSA Conference earlier this year, we were dubbed the Azure Security Deployment Partner of the Year by Microsoft. So as you look across all of the opportunities that you have to kind of work with Insight from application development perspective, from IoT, from endpoints and managed devices, and of course to the security and deployment aspects of Azure, we're your go-to. And obviously the slide kind of speaks for itself. I won't drain it. I'll actually turn time over to Tony Manelli, who's going to talk to you about this complexity of cybersecurity right now.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jason. So my name is Tony Manelli. Thank you for joining today. This slide is really kind of going through, what is the complexity of intelligent security? This is based on some trends that we're seeing, across multiple different industries and clients over the last 12 to 18 months. And some of the key business drivers that are pushing clients to consider a SIEM, Sentinel, or managed security solution, is really around, infrastructure consolidation, cloud-first initiatives. And what we're seeing on average is approximately 70 security products from up to 35 different security vendors in our client environments. And what we're discovering is most are in the initial implementation stage or, barely implemented at all, which kind of leads to the next metric, which is, this kind of creates complexity from a visibility, detection, and response perspective. And what, the metric is 1.37 million on average is what an organization spends, really responding to false positives. And then we're all really kind of clear as to the $3.5 million shortage in security resources. Next slide, please. Okay. So to the complexity aspect, we've put this together as kind of a visual to, show you, our clients, there's a whole host of problems that you're faced with today. Anything from GDPR, PCI, PHI, PII. If you look on the right-hand side, you'll see, all the kind of alphabet soup of cybersecurity as it pertains to the solutions. And, fortunately or unfortunately, these are offered by, multiple different vendors in your environment. So really understanding, how we can pull those together into a comprehensive solution. Jason?
Sorry, I was on mute. And to Tony's point, as you deal with all the alphabet soup of security, we wanted to kind of bring up our service lifecycle, regardless of whether we're talking about Sentinel specifically, although that's what this timeline kind of represents. The standard methodology that we would do to kind of go in and talk about adding a new security product or a capability from an assessment perspective, implementation, then the innovation aspect, and then a manage and secure perspective. So let me talk a little bit about from a Sentinel perspective. As you're looking at something like Sentinel, there's this, will it work for us? Economically feasible? Is there, are we ready and ripe to go to a cloud-based SIEM product? And we kind of wanted to make sure we've got a couple, depending on where your entry point is, you may have already made these choices. And of course, we can come in at any particular point related to this life cycle. But if you're still on that kind of, let me check this out, and maybe a lot of you folks that have joined the call today are here just for that particular aspect, we've got some great, very low cost or even free opportunities for you to get a look at what the product will do, how you will use it, and whether the feasibility from an economic perspective even makes sense for you. When you've made that decision to get into it, of course, we've got a couple of different ways that we can approach that as well. And this is kind of tailored to the appetite that the organization has. Sometimes you're adding and augmenting the capabilities that you've got from a security operations perspective. Sometimes you want a net new capability that's going to focus on a specific portion of your organization. And we've tailored what we call jump starts related to these, where you can come in really quick, show some value, not disturb what what you currently have going on from a monitoring or capability perspective, so that you can see kind of the proof of concept of what's going on. Then we've of course got the legitimate migrations from a current platform that you've got into this platform, and of course deploying and actually getting Azure Sentinel in place and working appropriately with your organization in the way that you currently work. Once it's instantiated, of course, then there is I'm a big maturity model guy, so we've got to go to we've just defined it, we want to manage and optimize it as we move forward in this life cycle. So that's when we start to talk about innovation. Innovation means something different depending on where you are from a maturity perspective, and what capabilities you currently have, what capabilities you desire to have, and that's where a lot of innovation can occur. So from the applications that you're monitoring, where those applications reside, the analytics that you are capturing, and how you want to act and refine based on those analytics that exist. And not just from a current perspective, but we support obviously the advanced AI, DevOps, and IoT scenarios related to that innovation. That's one of the great things about being at Insight from a security perspective. We like what we do, but being able to take a solution that includes holistically a transformation of the organization is what we would place into that innovation portion of the life cycle. And then of course there's the manage and secure aspect. We've got, depending on what your appetite is for managing your own cloud, managing your security operations specifically, or other key managed aspects of your environment, whether they be Azure or not, we've got a very robust capability from a managed security perspective and managed services perspective. Actually, one of the things I should have highlighted on the first slide with the Microsoft capabilities is we're an expert MSP by Microsoft, which is a very interesting designation from a managed service provider from a Microsoft perspective. And we're really pleased about that. And having this, we feel, completes the portfolio end to end related to our capabilities there. And I insisted that we put this slide in, and no, you're not expected to look at every box on this slide, but what is important about this is we're talking about our Sentinel in this particular webcast, and if you look, it's the pink box in the upper left that's part of the Security Operations Center portion of the reference architecture that Microsoft has for security. So if you look, there's lots and lots of other aspects. So as you're looking at Azure Sentinel, if you're looking at it from a standalone perspective and you haven't licensed some of the other products here, that's an interesting aspect, and we could approach it like that. But if you are approaching it from the aspect of integrating it with your other identity and access control, your information protection, your mobile devices, your desktops, or other third party, that's one of the brilliant things about Sentinel is that it can monitor everything from an on-prem and a hybrid environment and a multi-cloud environment. It is kind of the central repository for where you can do the correlations and the alerts for a multitude of different products. And I'm sure that Gary will talk about those things in the next little bit. But I did want to show, I know this is daunting to have this many things at your disposal if you're like E3 or E5 license. And we speak across this entire reference architecture as Insight. And Gary, I'll transition over to you as far as that goes.
Thank you. So this slide is showing you the SIEM pricing model comparison. If anybody's familiar with the IaaS, PaaS versus SaaS model, this is going to be very similar. On the left, we have the traditional SIEM costs. These are 100% on-premises. So you pay for the hardware, the licenses for the hardware, operating systems, everything else. In the middle, we have vendor-managed cloud IaaS SIEM. So the vendors are taking basically the on-premises environment, moving it into the cloud, hiding some of the infrastructure from you, some of the complexity, but you still have a lot that you need to pay for. Then you go to Azure Sentinel, where it is a 100% cloud-first environment, software as a service. You're not paying for the hardware. You don't care about the hardware. You don't even know where the hardware is. It just works for you, and it'll expand as needed. We go to our next slide. As I was just saying,
Gary,
there is no infrastructure. Sure.
Yes, sorry. Thank you very much for asking questions, folks. And we have a question I think kind of pertinent to where we are right now in the conversation. No, sorry. The question is, how does Sentinel compare to other SIEMs from a feature perspective? Can you answer that one, Gary?
Sure. Well, feature-wise, if you look at some of these other SIEMs that have been out there forever, yes, they're going to have features that Azure Sentinel doesn't have yet. But Sentinel will provide 95 to 99% of what you need out of the box, and then it can be expanded through different connectors or the APIs to meet all the other needs. And Microsoft is constantly improving it. You'll see changes almost daily on improvements, and we just had a seminar on some of the roadmap features that are coming down, and they're pretty impressive.
Yeah, and I think as we'll talk about later on in the case study, when we've engaged with clients in situations like this where they need to do a like-for-like replacement of their SIEM products, we're finding that Sentinel is able to meet those needs without any issue. So I think that kind of boils down to there are a lot of capabilities that exist in different platforms, whether or not customers are actually utilizing all those capabilities or whether we're just doing a bake-off and a like-for-like kind of comparison between the two. That's one of the things that we can do from an assessment perspective and kind of move forward. And to your point about Microsoft including additional capabilities, I know that their budget last year was $1 billion invested in that security reference architecture that we had up earlier, and I know that they are very, very committed from a Sentinel perspective to make this the best that it can be.
Very much so. So as I was saying earlier, there is no infrastructure cost. There's no upfront commitment. You pay on the amount of data that you ingest. Now, the nice thing is you don't have to pay for all the data that's being ingested. For instance, Office 365 data, which is a considerable amount of data, that's all free for ingestion and usage. So some months you may be having 100 gigs worth of data coming in at every day. Other months you may only have 10 to 20 depending on your environment. Well, you would pay only on that data coming in. So next slide, we're talking about Azure Sentinel Connectors. This is how you're getting your data coming in from your systems. Now, there's different ways that the connectors work. Some of these, as you can see in the top left, are native connectors. They will work mainly with other Azure systems. The direct connections are either working with Azure systems or third-party vendors that have gone out and created the connectors directly, for instance, Palo Alto or Cisco. At the very bottom, we have API connections. Those are usually reserved for last-ditch efforts. If none of the other connectors will work for you, you can use the APIs to go out to these systems, grab the information, and push it into Sentinel yourself. And over on the right, we have the agent-based. On the bottom right is the Windows Server agent. This is an agent you can push to all of your Windows and actually Linux servers to get the logs from them. So you can get all the event logs from your Windows and Linux devices, as well as some performance counters. At the very top, we have the syslog. This is to get the information from applications running on your Linux environment. A lot of times, you will need this to gather information from third-party systems. For instance, Cisco MindMeld is one that we ran into. There's no direct connection to that, but you can use the syslog agent or the CEF agent to gather that information and still place it into Azure Sentinel. So the next slide is detect threats and analyze security data quickly. So one of the nice things about Sentinel is it's using machine learning behind the scenes to gather information about various alerts that your system have generated, and it can possibly create an incident based on those alerts that you may not necessarily have a rule set up to generate that on yourself. You can also bring your own machine learning models if you have data scientists that can create these for you, or you can use a consulting company to get that. If there's something that Azure Sentinel is not doing for you, you can create your own machine learning models and bring those into Sentinel yourself. And finally, the user entity behavior analytics is something new with Microsoft Sentinel. It's part of it is working now to get SSH logins from Linux servers, and there's also a private preview to go into even more depth where you can see issues related to individual users. The nice thing is, using the machine learning models, you can reduce alert fatigue by up to 90%. So it will go out and watch all the alerts being generated, and if they're not going to be looked at, then it will remember that and save those, but not necessarily show it to you because you have determined you don't care about that particular alert type. The next slide is talking about investigating threats. Now, the picture being shown is a graphical interface which allows you to not only look at your own alert or incident, but also to see related alerts to that. So it's kind of hard to tell from this picture, but the blue dot is a user, and what will happen is the person moused over that blue dot, and then there is a series of other queries that can be run. And one of the queries is to show related alerts, and that's what those three black dots in the middle of their screen are for. That person also has those three additional alerts related to them so that you can get a much bigger picture of what's going on in your environment instead of just looking at an incident as an isolated entity. You can also use some hunting built-in queries that Microsoft provided, or you can add your own. And then there's also the Azure Notebooks, which is a hosted Jupyter Notebooks environment. Now, if you're not familiar with Jupyter Notebooks, it's a very powerful platform that allows you to combine text and programming languages, for instance, Python, to gather information not only from Azure Sentinel, but from outside Azure or outside Azure Sentinel, and combine those together to do even more comprehensive threat hunting than you do even inside of Sentinel alone. And the last thing we're going to talk about is the orchestration and automation, or the SOAR part of Azure Sentinel. This will allow you to build Azure Logic apps that can respond automatically to specific events. For instance, if you're getting something from your threat intelligence feed telling you there's an IP address that's pushing malware, you can use the Logic app to automatically block the IP address from coming into your system at all. And that's just the tip of the iceberg what you can do with this. You can create tickets in your ticketing service, for instance, ServiceNow. You can interact with other security products from Azure. You can call other APIs outside of Azure even, and send emails for automation responses. Really, the sky's the limit. Now, Tony will talk about more on Insight.
Thank you, Gary. So, really back to the initial lifecycle conversation, it really doesn't matter where you're at in the life cycle. Insight can come in and help you out. We're helping clients answer the question, can I utilize my existing investments in, infrastructure, software, cloud, so on and so forth. And in general, we've kind of summarized it into greenfield, replacement, and augmentation. But back to kind of that original slide, if you remember, we're really talking about, understanding your requirements, defining your decision criteria, aligning those to your specific use cases, and then really getting started and kind of seeing what the tool is capable of and how it applies to your environment by performing an initial quick start or POC or proof of value. And then, aligning that and getting the business stakeholders really bought in and showing the capabilities along with the, potential cost savings and infrastructure consolidation, getting into the implementation, operationalization, and optimization. It's really kind of a partnership at that point, to really go in and fine tune that on an ongoing basis to make sure that, we really work with you and provide the visibility, detection, and response capabilities that you're looking for in a tool across, all of your environment. So, we remember the alphabet soup slide. We remember Jason's Microsoft cybersecurity reference architecture slide and the complexity. So the architects and the team really put this cybersecurity reference framework together, to simplify that, and really help you understand, how you can, not only from a current state, but from a future state perspective, align what the future of the organization and how you're managing risk in the organization, and providing this as more of an executive dashboard, to communicate to the business.
Thanks, Tony. So as we designed this reference architecture that we're going to go through right now, we've been working with Azure Sentinel since when it was in preview to just a few partners. It was actually under a different code name. It was hard to actually migrate our terminology to Sentinel when they actually dubbed it that, because we had been working with it for a while. We built a very robust managed services capability around it, and this is and trying to figure out the best way for our clients to actually implement this in a manner that gives them the ability to move it easily to a managed capability. Like once you get this set up and it's incorporated into your organization, and having the ability to actually let somebody else come in and manage that for you was one of our prime concerns, because we do believe that as folks kind of get into this and see the capabilities that exist, it could potentially be overwhelming to their teams. And we wanted to provide that mechanism. So in this particular case, as you see the partner services coming in from the left and other operators potentially coming in from the left, and there's certainly more available on this, but this is just kind of a general overview. But creating that secure environment in a new Azure subscription, which we stand Sentinel up in, connecting it into the log analytics through those connectors into your production environment, which, as you can see on the right-hand side, includes many Azure-based services, but it also, if you look, can include external entities like AWS, Palo Alto Networks, and other services that can be pulled in through that series of connectors. And I think I heard syslog mentioned earlier as well. Anything that supports syslog could certainly ingest back into the Sentinel platform. Having it set up this way, again, then there's the aspect of the operators coming in via secure access so that we can control this. You know, one of the things that you really want is a level of security around your environment that controls security. Developing those playbooks for yourself, ingesting the appropriate threat intel from either the ones that come native from a Microsoft perspective, but additional areas of threat intel. You know, doing your investigation work, passing that off from a case management perspective, from a ticketing perspective. I heard Gary mention ServiceNow earlier. Those are all the things from a usability perspective that we, you know, develop this reference architecture against. We're advocates for the client. We don't want it to be complex. We want it to be easy to stand up, easy to control and cost and predict those costs, easy to access by your teams, and like I said, easier, and as I go to the next slide, to use with a trusted partner that's going to come in and help you at different tiers. Again, we're very flexible with the way that we work with our clients and the types of tiers that they would have us work with them on, whether it's just an alerting type, a monitoring perspective, whether there are actually responses that happen from our side, or basically anything from a bespoke perspective we can work out with our clients because we designed the way that their reference architecture should work and the way that our isolated tenant works to interface with those. There's a feature called Azure Lighthouse, which was designed specifically for MSPs in mind, managed service providers, so that it could access multiple clients in a multi-tenant type fashion, but still provide that single dashboard, the ability to monitor and access multiple clients at the same time in a secure way. And that was an important aspect for the way that we designed the environment here. And I think that, you know, as we talk about security operations in general, or the SOC, you know, a SIEM is not a SOC, right? We're talking about Azure Sentinel, which is a SIEM product, although it has some SOAR capabilities and some of the other things that Gary mentioned, but it's not security operations center in and of itself. As you remember from that reference architecture where I talked about the small little pink block that it was in the middle of that SOC, there were a lot of things that Microsoft doesn't consider that they provide at present. And I think, in my opinion, one of the main catalysts behind the development of Sentinel from Microsoft's perspective was that it tied all of their stuff together into a platform that was easy to integrate and manage and have those capabilities from an operations perspective for you. I think as you do decide on a platform, which we really have gone full force behind Sentinel, and we could work with any platform. We're actually agnostic when we go into a client on every security level. And we're not going to force Sentinel, of course, but it does make a lot of sense with a lot of the momentum that's going on in the industry right now to leverage it. But, you know, all of those things that you do and you do well, if you've got the great threat intel feeds that you've operationalized in your organization, those things are still yours. They can still come into this platform and be enhanced by it. But all the moving forward threat intelligence, you know, if I'm going to utilize Microsoft's threat intel capabilities, well, guess what? They're updated. There's billions of clients that exist out there and lots of information that comes in, and that's a great thing to align with, in my opinion, as well as the correlations and those types of things that come from having all of the different ATP, the advanced threat protection from Windows Defender, from Azure, from Office 365, all of those components, and getting that that information pulled in from a threat intelligence perspective into this platform is a really, really positive thing. That can be very daunting because it's more than just having something where you throw all your logs to. It's really important to have that ability to correlate and to operationalize that and go back into your environment, connect into your own ticketing systems and your own systems in order to do that. But that was just kind of an explanation of how we designed the reference architecture in general, back to that first slide, and how we designed our managed services related to this to integrate well, regardless of where you are from the journey. Some people are instantiating Sentinel just to monitor their cloud resources. As Gary said, the O365 stuff is kind of a, man, why aren't we doing this? Especially since there's a preview on available for Sentinel right now, and we can pull the O365 data in for free. Why aren't we taking a look at this to see what the capabilities are? But then a lot of people at that point kind of say, I think there's more. There's more that we can do with this, and we want to enhance this platform by pulling other data in, maybe from another SIEM. Maybe you maintain 2 SIEMs concurrently, and one does what it's always done, but can feed information and alerts back into Sentinel so that you can action on those alerts. And sorry, I could go for days. I'm not trying to steal anything here, but I think that, Gary, this is a great opportunity for you to kind of talk about the implementation that we did early on. I think one of the very first migrations from Azure Sentinel in an environment that I think was, pretty important, if I do say so. I'll turn the time over to you.
Yes, this one was actually done before Sentinel was generally available. We were asked to go to a professional basketball team, and they had an existing SIEM product that the license was going to expire very soon, and they wanted to migrate that into Azure Sentinel. So we went in, looked at how they had set up their existing SIEM product, compared that to Azure Sentinel, and made sure that it was a one-to-one, like-to-like, as far as all the data coming in and all the queries being performed. And we actually found out that Sentinel had a lot more out of the box than what they already had, and we were finding a lot of different issues that were not coming up beforehand. So it was a very big win. It's a little hectic because we had to do it very quickly, but very fulfilling, and we worked closely with Microsoft to make sure that all the needs were met on this one. Jason?
Yeah, I think that's no, thank you. I think that's a good point that, this was general availability of the product. Microsoft partnered with us because they knew this was high profile for them. And actually, if you're checking the news lately, I think there was a news brief, at least, if not yesterday, day before, where they talked about the NBA standardizing on Azure as their platform moving forward. So I think that they had a good experience with this, and I know that there are other teams that are interested in this solution that we are talking to, but the overall, I think that platform, them moving to this platform, is a rather interesting mode to come out of this particular engagement. Not saying this was the thing that made them make the decision, but it was definitely part of the catalyst, I think. Tony?
Thank you, Jason. So the resources available to you, keep an eye out for a follow-up email. Insight has developed a lot of information in regards to Sentinel, data sheets, case studies, ebooks. You can also, find us on LinkedIn or contact us on the website. So what are some of the next steps? We went through a lot of information. We went through a lot of information really fast today. Really where we're seeing is, clients talking about booking a demonstration, really maybe a conversation around understanding where you're at in your current deployments, having a discussion around, your requirements, proposed future state, really answering, really bring us some of your questions, and we'd really love to answer those for you. Can Microsoft, assist with security? Is Sentinel capable? Can I replace my existing SIEM? So on and so forth. So we love questions like that. Please feel free to bring those. And then, are you considering managed service? Now, that might not be right away, but what we're seeing is a lot of clients, are considering managed services, maybe not today, but, 1 to 3 years out. Let's start having that conversation now and how Sentinel could potentially help. And then Gary has done a fantastic job, not only writing the book, but also developing training programs, so we can work with your teams to, train and perform thorough knowledge transfers and go through best practices as well. And thank you very much, everyone. Any questions?
Here is there was a question as to whether there was a matrix that compared other products to Sentinel and from a competitive nature, like the bake-off. And there is not a full one that exists right now. I've seen some that compare very specific ones, and obviously this is Microsoft's on Microsoft to do all the competitive analysis of that. But there are some links that are available on Microsoft's site to certain SIEMs I've seen, but there isn't this holistic chart that kind of does the bake-off between. But we know, and we work very closely with the Microsoft teams, we know that they're working on this. I think there was a pricing perspective on that they wanted to get right. Tony? Oh, sorry, I thought you had a question. And I think I see that there's another question. What is the initial setup cost, or is it just implementation? Gary, do you have an answer to that question?
Sure. There is no initial setup cost. As we said earlier, it's all about the amount of data that you bring in, with some of that data actually being free, like Office 365. So if you want to go out and just look around, like Jason was saying, start bringing in your Office 365 logs, take a look, see what's going on. As long as you store the data for 90 days or less, it's going to be 100% free for you.
And we recommend that. I think, we've had clients that do that, and one of the things, like we said, we have kind of a reference architecture that we kind of roll with related to that, is once you do make that investment into setting it up, pulling some data in, you might get some good value out of it that you want to keep going. So again, we've got some recommendations on how you should set that up so that you can do it in a way that makes it so easier for you to go into production. And then to Tony's point, if you ever think you want to have that managed down the line, thinking about that on the front end instead of having to do a migration from your own install to make it more accommodating for those third parties to come in and help you out with that solution is something to think about on the front end of this. But definitely get started. And, we have a custom, what we call a jump start for clients who want to do just that, get it set up properly, get it stood up very quickly, and in 3 days, basically, you can start seeing some real, it takes a little while to get that data in and start doing some stuff, but in 3 days, basically, you can start seeing some real information coming out of O365 that'll show you your security posture there. We've got, and we work with Microsoft, again, we're very, very close with those guys. When there are funding options available, we will make you aware of those, and sometimes, depending on, what kind of client you are of Microsoft's to begin with, there are options for funding for some of these smaller engagements that we've got. So we're advocate for you guys to get that stuff done for you.
Hey guys, we got another question that just came in about a demo for Sentinel. Could you maybe answer how clients could go about getting a demo?
Go ahead, Gary.
Well, we can do demonstrations for you. The reason we're not doing one during this presentation is to get a full demo. We'd like to specify or have it set to work with your environment as much as possible to get some idea of how it's going to help you, not just a general demonstration. If you contact us, we can see about setting up a demonstration for you.
Yep. And again, we've got sandboxes that we can play around in, but to Gary's point, it probably makes a little more sense for some folks to do this with their own data and to help them get through kind of that jumpstart portion so that they can get some real data and show real results or do a comparison against their current implementation.
Yeah, and I think that brings up a really good point. If you have questions or, if there's, a follow-on webinar that you would like to see, certainly let us know. I think it's becoming pretty clear that, maybe the next webinar would be really focused on the demo. I think that's great feedback. So please, if you have any other feedback, let us know, and, we can work with the team to get that put together.
Another question, how does this integration with my existing infrastructure, or how does this integrate with my existing infrastructure, including existing SIEM? Gary, you want to take that one?
There's a couple different ways you can do this. First of all, let me say that Azure Sentinel can definitely get the information from your existing infrastructure, either through direct connecting of the data connectors, or more likely it's going to be a syslog CEF type of connector. Now, if you have an existing SIEM, there's a couple ways we can go about this. You can run Sentinel side by side with your existing SIEM, having Sentinel take all the Azure information and have your SIEM maybe taking the on-premises information. Or as we did with the basketball team, we can work to replace your existing SIEM with Azure Sentinel, making sure that you still have all the same capabilities. But short version, you can definitely get all your information from your existing infrastructure or existing SIEM.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions. We certainly have time set aside for it. Any closing remarks, Tony, Gary?
No, I think everything is, we wanted to say thank you for the time, and please submit your feedback, and we'll make sure to schedule another one of these based on your feedback. Thank you.
Again, I think, yeah, to Tony's point, thinking off, riffing off of this particular session, we do, I'm one of those guys that loves to see a demo of this kind of stuff, and we can certainly do that. I think we had to kind of set the stage for what the demo was all about, but if you want to put some in the comments, like how many people would be interested in something like that, we would definitely love to do it, because I think the three of us are pretty much nerds on that kind of stuff, but we had to back up and talk about from a business perspective how to the justifications for this, the value prop for the organization. And if you're interested in that kind of thing, whether it be another webinar or whether it be even better, maybe for you, a demo that's custom for your organization. I see a new question coming in. If we've done the 90-day trial before in Sentinel's early form, could we start a trial again? Gary, looks like you're going to answer that.
There is no trial with Azure Sentinel. You can just keep ingesting the data, for instance, from Office 365. It's free. The thing is, you can store that data for 90 days free of charge as well. So if you're just ingesting Office 365 data and storing it for 90 days or less, it's free to continue to run this as long as you want.
Oh, that's a great point. So, Jerry, I hope that answered your question, but it sounds like if you're interested in getting a little more out of the capabilities of Sentinel while you're trying to try before you buy type situation, that using the O365 data ingesting into that is definitely something you can continue to do on an ongoing basis. If you'd like to talk to us about some other kind of capability you'd like to do or to check out, give us a shout and we'll be happy to help you out with that. All right. Well, thank you, Tony, Gary, for sharing your expertise with us today. Thank you all for joining us, and thanks a lot for the questions. These sessions are cool when we have those interactions with the folks who've joined. So thank you very, very much. And I guess we'll turn it back over to you guys. Rachel?
Yep. Thanks, everyone, for joining. So we'll be closing out and sharing the recording of the webinar and some of those resources after the event. Thanks, everyone.